My name's Karen. I was acting deputy manager at Pelham Care Home in Folkestone during the COVID outbreak. I had previously left Pelham due to personal reasons, but when COVID hit, I asked them if they needed me and they said yes please, so I went back, not really knowing what to expect, just taking each day as it comes, which turned out to be probably one of the most horrific times that we've had there, to be fair. We had no testing kits or anything for a long while. Then we had a special team came in, did some testing, and we found out that 90% of our residents were, in fact probably 95% of our residents were positive, and over half of the staff. So that was quite horrific. And from there, everything just fell apart. We lost half our residents, over half our residents, with 4 or 5 staff working every day, 24 hours, that's just 4 or 5 staff. We were doing the cooking, the domestic work, the caring, everything, absolutely everything. And of course, families couldn't come in, they couldn't come visit their loved ones. We couldn't really go home to ours. If we lived with anyone, we had to isolate from them because it was just so horrific. The symptoms, the daily watching those poor residents just pass away in the most horrific way. I will never disclose how they did for the family's sakes. I will never disclose that. But just to say it was horrific is enough. And then there was another side. There was another side to it. There was the camaraderie between the staff. There was neighbours clapping for us daily outside. There was them bringing us cakes, biscuits, chocolates, flowers, fruit, anything that they thought we might need, they bought us on a daily basis, or just stood outside and just clapped us or cheered us when we left in our cars. And the peace and quiet, everywhere was so quiet and peaceful. It was just totally surreal. I hope we never have to go through anything like that again. It was just the most surreal feeling of peace and tranquility half of the time, and sheer terror the other half. It was the most bizarre time. Regarding the day-to-day working of the home, everything revolved around those residents that were poorly and the ones that we were trying desperately not to get poorly. So only having such few staff members there, it was very hard, very stressful to gown up and everything with masks and face shields and complete boiler suits that we wore from head to toe, shoe covers, gloves, aprons on top of those, go into that room, do what you possibly could for that person, come out, completely decontaminate, throw everything away, antibacterialise every part of you, and then go and cook someone's lunch. And then clear up from that lunch and then go and look after somebody who just needed to help to go to the loo, and which you would just put on your PPE all over again, help that person come out of that room, decontaminate, go into the next room, and then you might just be making a cup of tea for someone, but it was a permanent, I've got to get that lot off, decontaminate, got that lot on, and being so few of us, it was just non-stop. The whole day, 12 hours, just non-stop. And then when the night staff came in, it would be the same for them, non-stop. You were desperately trying to save the people who you could clearly see were not going to be with us much longer, to going to someone else who appeared well, and you were desperately trying to think, have I got every inch of me off that person who is ill to go to someone who is not ill yet? And so there was this just constant stress and pressure of making sure you didn't carry a single, or try not to carry a single piece of infection from somebody who was poorly to somebody who wasn't, and keeping them, because they all had dementia, bless them, trying to keep them all separated, keep the ones that were poorly in their rooms, and the ones that weren't poorly, we tried to keep those separate from everyone else. So, and they didn't understand why. They thought we were just being mean. They didn't understand we were trying to save their lives, because you couldn't explain that to them. You couldn't explain what this disease was and what it was doing to people, and because A, they wouldn't have understood, and B, it would have terrified them if they had understood. And then trying to explain why their families could only see them through windows and not come into the house, and which they'd always done. So mental state was permanently in overdrive. It really was. The day went before you knew it, because you just didn't stop. We were always worried about how COVID came in, always asking ourselves, lockdown had just started when I came back, so we weren't having visitors in, but we still had to have doctors come in, we still had to have district nurses come in for the daily aspects of living. As there was no nurses or doctors worked at the home, any medical assistance or anything we needed, we had to have people come in. When the panorama went out, I saw a comment on there that, and they were still letting doctors and nurses in. We had to. That it wasn't an option. There was no one else to do diabetic injections or anything that they needed, or, if anyone fell, I think we needed to call ambulances, full stop. We couldn't have done that ourselves. We will never know. We will probably never know how COVID came in to the home. Like I say, the staff had to go backwards and forwards. The staff had to shop. The staff had to go to GPs. And so, we'll never know. But it was always a cause of concern for all of us. It could have been any of us brought it in. Any of the staff. Could have been anybody. And we were eating ourselves up. And there was absolutely nothing we could have done about it. So we always wondered how it came in, how it started. I mean, one of our residents did have to go to hospital, but he was poorly, which is why he went to hospital. He was poorly. None of us were really sure whether, he may have COVID, he may have heart problems. It could have been anything, absolutely anything. So he went to hospital, but he did come back without a test. Tested him, but they hadn't had the results. They sent him back. And then we found out 2 days later that he had COVID. So that's really when it all began. But he was poorly before he went in. So, he probably did have it before he went in. We cried daily. We lost 10 residents between 12 and 14 days. And it was horrific, absolutely horrific. I mean, the staff would get upset when anyone's life just progressed normally and then passed away. But for this horrific amount of people that died in that little time, and the horrific way they died, was just very, very traumatic for the staff. And we supported each other through the day. We were forever texting people if they had a day off, or, we had each other's backs the whole time. And so did our families. Were amazing, absolutely amazing. All the staff would say that without their families they couldn't have carried on, I don't think. But we all had each other's backs. We were all watching out for each other constantly and checking for any signs of it being a bit too much for anyone. The younger ones, especially the younger ones, it seemed to affect more. We continually kept an eye on those, asking if they wanted leave, if they needed time off, if they needed a day off, if they needed to go home through the shift, we would cover it. So yeah, we just looked after each other. I did become a very nervous person. Years previously, I suffered with anxiety and stuff, just life, basically, which started off when my ex-husband was in the army and we got sent to Northern Ireland, and it was in the 80s, so it was quite a horrific time. So that, I think, started my anxiety off. But, I'd learned to cope. You have to, don't you, go through life. But around that time, I found myself very nervous around other people. Very, very nervous. I had a lot of confidence in the way I protected myself and my family, I think. I lived with my son. We used separate bathrooms. We kept in separate parts of the house as much as we could. But going shopping and seeing other people coming too close made me very nervous. I don't know whether it was because I was frightened I might give them something. I think in the back of my mind was always the fact that those residents caught it from someone, and Could it have been one of us? Could we have given it to them? So I was always very protective of other people, trying not to get too close to other people. But then as time went on and people seemed to be getting fed up with lockdown and I'm not doing another one, I've done one, I'm not doing another one. Hundreds of people going to the beach on sunny days and stuff. And it made me very nervous, very, very nervous. I didn't want to be with other people. I wouldn't go and visit any of my family that I didn't live with. The first time I hugged my grandson was well after we were able to mix again, but I still gowned up in everything just to hug him, just to go and hug him in his garden. I gowned up with everything. It made me very nervous, I think is just the word that covers it all. It's just nervous of being around other people, having other people too near me and not trusting people to follow the rules. I didn't trust anyone to follow the rules. Be testing and be isolating if they've tested positive. And a lot of people said, I don't believe in COVID. I don't believe in vaccinations. But the evidence is there. You don't need to believe or not believe, it's there for you to see. Come and spend a day with me and then tell me whether you believe it or not. I was very cross, very angry afterwards. People were saying they didn't believe in COVID. What is there for you to believe? Wherever it came from happened, it's here. You can't disbelieve it. The evidence is there, over 1,000 people a day dying. Something's killing them, whatever it is, however it got here, whoever caused it, it's here. The only way we were going to get out of it was by following the rules, and we just don't like following rules, do we, I guess. I think lockdown should have started earlier. I think other countries were doing it. We're just so scared of offending people in this country. We're so worried about what other people might think, or just stand up, just make a stand. It needs doing, do it. Go into lockdown earlier. Bring in these regulations earlier. I know it's something we've never done in this country. We've never even worn masks, really, in this country. But it should have all been done earlier. Should have been started earlier. And we might have been able to save a few more people than we did. Over 1,000 a day dying. We're doing something wrong. Definitely doing something wrong. I've seen in the papers recently about cases on the rise, different variants, and I don't know what they could have done different. There's supposedly a ring of steel round care homes, but we never actually found out what that ring of steel was supposed to be, because nothing in our daily lives changed with regards to outside help. Nothing. We had one district nurse, God love her, who was coming in, administering end-of-life medications, verifying death. She just looked like an empty shell by the time we'd finished. By the time the last resident had, we hadn't got any more cases. And that she was the only person really that we saw. She was constantly there on a daily basis, sometimes 3-4 times a day, or a couple of them started coming in 3 or 4 times a day. And I don't know, what would have been helpful is when our residents were poorly, and I know they had thousands of people in hospitals, in A&E, on life support, in ICU, I know that. But I think if we could have just had a little bit of help with these residents so they didn't have to suffer so much, if they could have just gone to hospital, or like one gentleman did in the end, went to a hospice. They came and helped us and took someone to a hospice. I think a little bit of medical support for care homes would have been good, because there was nothing we could do, nothing. I don't know what we could have done differently, I don't know. I guess more information at the beginning, what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing, and lockdown earlier, so that the staff weren't having to mix with everybody else. And I don't know. I honestly don't know.